It was just past noon when Darius stepped off the bus, a soft breeze tugging at the hood of his jacket. He had one thing on his mind: finding the perfect birthday gift for his little brother. His sneakers crunched against the clean sidewalk as he stood in front of Silvertech, the biggest electronics store in the area. Its windows were spotless, the kind that make you feel like you're not supposed to touch anything inside. Darius glanced at his phone and smiled. His mom was on FaceTime, asking if he'd made it there okay. "Yeah, Mom, I'm here," he said, flipping the camera to show her the store. "Just gonna look around, see if they still have that headset Jordan's been wanting." She reminded him, like always, to stay alert, to be careful. He promised he would, even though it always stung a little being reminded that just being himself could sometimes be a problem. Inside the store, a woman stood near the front counter, late 40s, perfectly ironed white blouse, the kind of look that says she doesn't miss much. The moment she noticed Darius outside, her smile dropped. Her eyes narrowed as she watched him through the glass. He didn't see her at first. He was busy stuffing his phone back into his pocket and pulling open the door. The store smelled like new plastic and cold metal. Darius gave a small nod to the cashier, then headed toward the aisle with the gaming headsets. But the woman didn't move. She stayed near the counter, gripping her purse just a little tighter. Her eyes locked on him like he was a walking alarm bell. He was reaching toward the headset shelf when she pulled out her phone. Her voice was sharp and just loud enough for everyone to hear. "Yes, hi, I'm at Silvertech Electronics. There's a young man here, acting suspicious. Black male, hoodie, looking around like he's planning to take something." Darius froze, hands still midair. He turned slightly, meeting her eyes. He hadn't even spoken yet, hadn't touched a single thing, but her voice kept going, a little faster now. "You should send someone quick. I think he's about to steal." Somewhere in the distance, a siren wailed. He hadn't even said a word. Darius wasn't just out shopping, he had a mission. For the past 2 months, he'd been saving every extra dollar he could. After school, he worked evenings at a small pizza place, folding boxes, wiping tables, and making sure the soda machine never ran dry. Most nights, he'd come home smelling like garlic and cheese, but he didn't mind. He had a reason. His little brother Jordan was turning 10 next week, and Darius knew exactly what he wanted to get him: a black and red wireless gaming headset with a built-in mic. Jordan had been talking about it nonstop, showing Darius pictures of it on his tablet every other day. Their family didn't have a lot of money, and birthdays usually meant small things: a cake, maybe a new shirt, maybe not. But Darius wanted to give Jordan something he'd remember, something that showed how much he loved him, even if he didn't always say it out loud. Their mom worked long hours, and she carried a kind of tired in her eyes that never really went away. She didn't talk about her job much, only that it was federal and stressful. Darius knew better than to ask questions, but he respected her in a way that went beyond words. She had raised the boys by herself, kept a roof over their heads, and made sure they had clean clothes and food, even when the fridge looked empty. He wanted to be someone she didn't have to worry about. So when he stepped off the bus that day, with his wallet tucked safely in his jacket, and his mind locked on that headset, he felt proud. He had done everything right, worked hard, stayed out of trouble, even double-checked his math to make sure he had enough for tax. The store was in a part of town he didn't visit often. Clean sidewalks, fancy storefronts, people walking tiny dogs and sipping expensive coffee. He knew some people might look at him a certain way, but he wasn't going to let that stop him. He had a goal, and he was going to reach it. All he had to do was walk in, buy the gift, and get home. Simple, or at least it should have been. The moment Darius stepped through the doors of Silvertech, the air felt different, not just because of the cold blast of AC or the faint scent of plastic and new electronics. It was something else, something quieter but heavier. The way eyes shifted, the way silence followed him for half a second longer than it should have. He kept his head up, reminding himself why he was there. The store was sleek and shiny, with rows of glowing screens and shelves stacked with the newest gadgets. Flat-screen TVs looped bright commercials in the background, and upbeat music played overhead. It all looked like something out of a commercial, to clean, to perfect. Darius tried not to overthink it. He just needed to find the gaming section, pick up the headset, and pay. He glanced around, spotting the headset near the back of the store. As he made his way there, He noticed the woman who had been staring at him earlier was now standing near the register. She wasn't shopping. She wasn't talking to anyone. She was just watching. Her body was turned toward the counter, but her eyes kept flicking over to where Darius was. Every few seconds, like she was waiting for something to happen. He pretended not to notice. He kept his pace calm and steady, even though he could feel her gaze burning into his back. When he reached the shelf with the headset, his heart picked up a little, not from nerves, but excitement. It was still there, the same one Jordan had shown him. He reached out slowly, checking the price tag one more time, doing the math in his head again just to be sure. Still good. He could afford it. Then, out of the corner of his eye, he saw movement. The woman was walking closer now, pretending to look at phone cases, but clearly keeping tabs on him. Darius didn't say anything. He didn't want trouble. He just stood quietly, holding the box, running his fingers along the edges. But the air around him felt tight, like something was about to break. Darius could feel her getting closer. Even before she spoke, the woman wasn't browsing anymore. She was standing just a few feet behind him now, arms crossed, her mouth tight like she was holding something back. He glanced over his shoulder, gave her a quick, polite smile, then turned back to the headset box in his hands. He didn't say anything. He knew better than to start a conversation he hadn't asked for. But she wasn't quiet for long. They locked those up for a reason, she said suddenly, her voice sharp and dry. People don't always pay for them, you know. He blinked, unsure if she was talking to him. There was no one else in the aisle. He turned a little and said, carefully, I'm just looking. She raised an eyebrow like that answer wasn't good enough. Huh? She said, not moving. Just make sure you put it back when you're done. Darius nodded once and looked away. His chest felt tight. Now, not because he'd done anything wrong, but because he knew this script. He'd lived it before. The long stares, the loaded comments, the way people acted like he didn't belong, like being young, black, and in the nice part of town meant he must be up to no good. He wasn't angry yet. Not really. He was used to this kind of thing. But each time, it still hit a little deeper. He started walking toward the counter with the box in hand, hoping that would end it. But the woman followed, staying close enough for him to hear her take out her phone. She wasn't trying to hide it now. I just don't feel safe, she said quietly into the speaker, but loud enough for Darius to hear. He's acting strange. Keeps looking over his shoulder. Something's off. Darius stopped in his tracks, his heart dropped. He hadn't done anything, hadn't raised his voice, hadn't run, hadn't even taken his hands out of his jacket pockets. But now the tone had changed. She wasn't just watching anymore. She was turning him into a threat. And even though he stood there frozen in the middle of a tech store, just holding a gift for his brother, he knew exactly what came next. The woman's voice grew louder, her words sharper and more dramatic with each sentence. He's getting agitated, she said into the phone, her eyes locked on Darius. He's holding something, and I think he's trying to walk out with it. He keeps looking at me. I don't feel safe. Darius just stood there, headset box still in his hands, completely still. He hadn't taken a single step toward the door. He hadn't raised his voice or made any sudden moves. He wasn't doing anything except trying to buy something. But now, with a few loud words and an accusing look, she painted him as a threat. The cashier behind the counter looked nervous, but didn't say a word. One customer near the laptop section paused, watching. Another woman slowly reached for her purse and clutched it close to her body, her eyes flicking toward the exit. No one stepped in. No one asked any questions. It was like a switch had flipped in the room, and now everyone had decided to believe the worst about him. Then Darius heard the faint wail of a siren in the distance. It was getting louder, fast. His stomach turned. It didn't matter that he still hadn't moved. It didn't matter that the security cameras were probably recording every second. Someone had made a call, and now the story had already been written. He looked down at the headset in his hands. For a second, he thought about putting it back on the shelf and walking out. Maybe that would make it stop. Maybe they'd just let him go if he disappeared. But deep down, he knew it didn't work like that. The moment she picked up her phone, she wasn't just calling the cops. She was handing him over to a version of the story where he didn't get to explain anything yet. All the sirens were closer. Now, Darius stood still, his jaw tight, his breathing shallow. He kept his hands visible, fingers loose, body calm, because even though he hadn't done a single thing wrong, He knew the people walking in wouldn't be looking for the truth. They'd be looking for someone to blame. The front doors flew open, and two police officers stepped inside, their faces tight, their eyes already scanning the store. One of them, older and broader, moved fast and firm, hand resting on his belt near his cuffs. The younger one hung back a little, his eyes flicking between the woman pointing and the teenager standing still in the middle of the aisle. "That's him," the woman called out, her fingers straight like she'd been waiting her whole life to do this. "He tried to steal. I saw him with my own eyes." Darius didn't move. His hands were still at his sides, empty, his backpack zipped. But it didn't matter. The older cop, the one with the deep voice and gray in his hair, stepped forward. "Put your hands where I can see them," he said quickly, like he wasn't interested in hearing anything first. "I didn't do anything," Darius said, trying to keep his voice calm. Not scared, not angry, just steady. "Hands, now," the officer barked, and the weight of it landed like a brick in Darius's chest. He raised his arms slowly, careful not to move too fast. Behind the counter, the cashier watched, wide-eyed but silent. The other customers either pretended not to see or leaned in just enough to stare. No one stepped in. No one asked for proof. The younger officer, the one with sharper eyes and a slower step, hesitated. He looked at Darius, really looked. His gaze moved to the headset still sitting on the counter, then back to the woman who was now clutching her phone like it was a weapon. Something wasn't adding up, and he seemed to sense it. But he didn't say a word. Not yet. The older officer reached for his cuffs. "Step outside," he ordered. Darius swallowed hard. He could feel the tightness in his throat, the heat rising behind his eyes. He wanted to speak. He wanted to scream. But he knew that saying the wrong thing, or even saying the right thing the wrong way, could make this spiral out of control. So he stood still, heart racing, mouth dry, hands raised, waiting for someone to listen, but knowing they probably wouldn't. Just as the older officer moved into cuff Darius, the front doors opened again, but this time the energy shifted. A woman stepped inside, tall, steady, with sharp eyes that scanned the room in one quick glance. She wore a dark blazer over a plain blouse, not flashy, but everything about her said she was in charge. Her heels clicked against the floor as she walked straight toward the officers without slowing down. "I'm looking for my son," she said, pulling a badge from her coat pocket and holding it up. "Special Agent Camille Porter, FBI." The room froze. The officer holding the cuff stopped mid-step, confusion flickering across his face. The younger one blinked, like he couldn't believe what he'd just heard. Darius slowly turned his head, his mouth opening just slightly. That was his mom. The woman who'd made the call took a small step back, her mouth open like she was going to say something, but nothing came out. Her eyes darted from Camille to Darius, back and forth, fast and nervous. Camille's voice stayed calm, but it carried weight. "Which one of you decided it was a good idea to put your hands on my son?" Without asking a single question, the older officer cleared his throat. "Ma'am, we got a report." "A report?" Camille cut in, her eyes locked on him. "Is not evidence, and a teenager standing in the store, doing absolutely nothing wrong, is not a reason to treat him like a criminal." No one spoke. Even the music in the store seemed to quiet down. Darius still hadn't moved. He was frozen between fear and something that almost felt like relief. His mom wasn't just there, she was there. Not yelling, not panicking, just firm, sharp, and completely in control. For the first time since the woman made that call, the story was no longer hers to tell. Camille didn't waste time. Her eyes went straight to the store manager, who had been hiding behind the counter the whole time. "I want to see the security footage now." Her voice was calm, but it had a weight behind it that made people move. The manager nodded quickly and hurried to the back without saying a word. The officers didn't argue. The older one, the one who'd been ready to cuff Darius, shifted uncomfortably. The younger one kept glancing between Camille and Darius, like he was finally realizing how bad this all looked. The woman who had made the call stood stiff, arms crossed, eyes wide like she was trying to figure out how this had flipped so fast. Camille walked over to Darius, looked him in the eyes, and asked softly, "You okay?" He nodded, barely, but he didn't speak. Everything inside him still felt tight, like if he said anything it would all come spilling out at once. The store manager returned with a small tablet. Camille stood next to him as he pulled up the footage. The video played silently, Darius walking it, saying hi to the cashier, picking up the headset, standing quietly, the woman watching him the whole time, and then nothing. No stealing, no sneaky movements, no threats, just a kid trying to buy a gift. When the video ended, the room stayed quiet. No one moved. Camille looked at the officers. "This," she said, pointing at the screen, "is what you nearly arrested my son over." Her voice was still low, but it cut through the air like a blade. The older cop said nothing. The younger one cleared his throat and muttered, "We should have checked the footage first." Camille turned to the woman who had made the call. "You said he looked suspicious. You said he was stealing. What do you see in that video that backs up anything you said?" The woman opened her mouth, then shut it again. Her face was red now. She looked around the room, like maybe someone would step in and defend her, but no one did. Camille didn't yell. She didn't need to. Her words hit harder than any shouting ever could. "You judged him before he even spoke. You called the police because you didn't like the way he looked, and everyone here let it happen." The weight of it hung in the air, heavy, uncomfortable. Darius stood there, his body finally starting to relax. But the weight inside him hadn't gone anywhere. The headset still sat on the counter where he left it, but now it felt like part of a different world, one where he was just a regular kid shopping for his brother, not someone accused, watched, and nearly cuffed. Camille turned to him and gently touched his shoulder. "We're going," she said quietly. Darius nodded and followed her toward the door. As they passed the woman, she looked like she wanted to say something, maybe an apology, maybe a weak excuse, but nothing came out. Her face was pale now, her mouth slightly open, like she'd finally realized how small her lies had become next to the truth. Darius didn't stop. He didn't even look at her. Outside, the street felt quieter than before. The noise of traffic and chatter was still there, but it felt distant, like the world had kept going while something inside him had changed. Camille didn't say anything for a few seconds. She just stood next to him, looking at her son the way only a mother could, like she knew everything he was feeling, even if he didn't say a word. Darius broke the silence. "I didn't yell. I didn't do anything wrong. And still, she looked at me like I was dangerous." "I know," Camille said softly. "You shouldn't have to explain who you are just to exist." He let out a breath that sounded more like a laugh, but there was no humor in it. "If you hadn't walked in when you did." Camille didn't finish the sentence. She didn't have to. They both knew how easily it could have gone another way. For a long moment, they stood in the quiet, both of them feeling the same thing, tired, frustrated, and somehow still holding it all together. Darius glanced down at his hands, still a little shaky. He had come to that store to buy a gift. Instead, he walked away with a story he never asked for. 3 days later, the story was everywhere. News outlets picked it up. Headlines flashed across TV screens and phone notifications. FBI agent confronts racial profiling in local store. Social media blew up with clips from inside the shop. Someone had recorded part of the scene on their phone. Thousands of people commented, shared it, talked about how fast things could have gone wrong if Camille hadn't shown up. The store, Silvertech, released a statement saying they were reviewing employee conduct and committed to fair treatment of all customers. The woman who made the call was no longer showing up to work. Whether she quit or was let go, nobody said. Darius didn't feel like celebrating. He scrolled through the posts, saw people praising his mom, calling her a hero. She didn't post about it. She didn't want attention, and he didn't either. He wasn't looking to be a headline. He just wanted to buy a gift for his brother. That afternoon, while sitting on the couch, he heard Jordan shout from the hallway, "Darius, look what Mom gave me." His little brother ran into the room, holding the same headset Darius had picked out. It still had the plastic on the box. Jordan's smile was huge, eyes shining like it was the best day of his life. "You like it?" Darius asked, his voice quiet. "Are you kidding? It's perfect." Jordan grinned, hugging the box to his chest. Then he paused. "But I thought you were going to buy it." Darius looked at him, then at the headset. He thought about the store, the cops, the woman, all of it. "I picked it out," he said, forcing a smile. "That's what matters, right?" Jordan nodded without a second thought and ran off again. Darius leaned back on the couch, letting out a slow breath. Maybe it wasn't the ending he had planned, but in that small moment, seeing his brother happy, hearing laughter instead of sirens, it felt like a piece of the weight had finally lifted, even just a little.